we're in a world where technology is personalized. So our support of people in some ways, and I know there are going to be people who are going to say, "Oh my God, don't say that out loud." It should be personalized. I think individual employee experience should be personalized. It's not a cookie cutter mass approach.
Some things are
I'm
common,
saying
some
it.
things are
I'm
individual. Yeah.
sure I'll get criticized for it, but that's okay.
Welcome to Vibe Check, a place where we have open, honest, and authentic conversations about the human side of business. Our goal is to help you achieve better business outcomes with people-led initiatives. And to get there, there's only room for real talk and genuine advice. No sugarcoating here. I'm JJ, Office Vibes resident employee experience researcher and your host for this series. Let's get right into it. Our guest today is Nancy Fijan. Nancy, welcome to Vibe Check. I hope I said your last name correctly.
You did. That's great. Hi, JJ. Nice to see you again.
Very nice to have you on our show. Thank you so much for being here. So please allow me the honor and pleasure to introduce you to our audience today. Nancy has over 20 years of experience in business transformation, focusing on the people side of change. Yay, we love this.
Yeah.
She's worked in financial services industries and currently in the standards and supply chain industry. She's actually been working with GS1 Canada for 4 years now, and she is based in Mississauga, part of the Greater Toronto area. Fellow Canadian. Her current role is to be the Senior Business Manager to the EVP, so Executive Vice President of Technology. And her role encompasses mainly three main parts, basically. She advises, manages, and drives strategic priorities and initiatives. She prepares the EVP, her EVP, for his board responsibilities, big job. She also helps manage department operations, including team alignment, team engagement, governance, and performance reporting. And last but not least, she's a busy woman. She also reviews and prepares for internal and external communications. So in a nutshell, you're kind of a chief of staff, right?
In a nutshell, we do have one for the CEO. I look up to her. She's fantastic. So I kind of aspire to do her role one day. Yeah.
One day, but I haven't been in similar situations. I think that working for a person in charge of technology is like one of the best positions in the business. It's so interesting, full of innovation, full of willingness to try different things. I find very agile, kind of like minded people, right? Would you agree?
100% totally agree. I think very early on in my, after I graduated university, one of the first things I was really interested in is understanding more about data and technology, which is bizarre considering I studied history and English for 4 years. And that love of technology has been with me probably ever since I graduated. And so the world is all about data and technology. And the most important ingredient to make that all work is the people.
It is the people. Well, I feel we cheated on our introduction. We jumped right to the conversation, which just goes to show and promises for a really interesting conversation. But Nancy, again, thank you so much for being on Vibe Check. Thank you for being our guest. We have this tradition where we open all of our episodes and close them, so you know it's coming, with what we call a quick vibe check. So the question I shall first ask is, how are you doing? Really?
I really appreciate that. I'm excited to be here and I'm doing really great. It's part of my core being, no matter what kind of a day I've had the day before, I'm one of those people that I go to bed, I reflect on things, and I wake up in the morning with this incredible energy and excitement because I know the day is full of possibilities. So for me, I'm always excited. And I think you've probably garnered that in our last few conversations. It's naturally who I am. So
I sure have. I think that's absolutely true. And it shines every time we talk. It's that mindset that comes at the forefront. And I truly admire that. I wish I could embody that more regularly. So you inspire me. Thank you.
I appreciate that. I practice a lot of self-care, but it's taken a long time to actually focus on self-care. And I think it's one of the fundamental important rituals we as human beings need to do on a day-to-day basis. And so I try to embody self-care. I practice it every day, and it helps me keep grounded and focused.
Oh, I love that. And I think it's a lesson that you learn in time, I guess. It comes with the wisdom of experience and age. And Thank you for reminding us that there's a time to learn that lesson. It can be now, regardless of who you are, the role
Absolutely.
that you embody, whether you have a family or you don't, whatever your life priorities are, and whatever age you are. There's never a time to realize how much taking care of yourself is important and impacts the way you're able to take care of others as well.
100%. That's
Starts
right.
with
Yeah.
you. So I gave like the professional introduction of who Nancy is. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about who you are as a person? Because like you, I want to know, the human behind.
The human behind the conversation. So, innately, I'm someone that's always curious. I've always been curious. I'm a lifelong learner in general. Even though I have a day job, which is amazing and I love it, I also have what I call a little, contribution back to the university. I am a teaching assistant at Dalhousie University for a professor who's a friend and mentor of mine, Dr. Rick Nason. I'm his TA for his risk management class. And there's something about teaching students something new and looking at their curiosity and understanding what their perspectives are. It helps me keep a pulse on what the future workforce is going to look like by having that connection with the university. And that's really important to me. I'm really big on family. I do have a little, fur baby. His name is Karchi. He's adorable. He's 10 years old, but he looks like he's still a puppy. Family, my dog, my friends are really important to me. I do like to travel. I'm glad we're out of the COVID bit. I do travel quite a bit. And my favorite place to go to is Halifax. It's probably the most beautiful place in the world for me.
And you've been just a couple of weeks ago.
I've been, yeah.
What's so magical about Halifax, may I ask?
For me personally, it's as soon as you step off the airplane, it's the air, the fresh air, and it's also the people. There's just a comfort and hominess and comfortableness about the whole city. It's a walkable city, which is amazing. I mean, I love the GTA, but to get anywhere, you really do need to have a car or use public transit.
Yeah.
It's the fresh air, it's the people, it's the vibe. The vibe in Halifax is just my jam, and I love it.
Oh my God, I love that. You've actually convinced me to go. I've never been, although I'm not that far in Montreal.
Highly recommend. Highly recommend.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for suggesting that. And thank you for telling us a little bit more about yourself.
Sure.
We've talked so many times, and these are things I didn't even know about you. So I'm glad we asked. I could not agree more. And I feel this is something we have in common, a passion, an innate need for curiosity and for asking questions, because to your point, that's how we understand people and we understand what matters to them. And I love that you brought to the conversation being passionate about teaching and curious about the workforce and how it's changing and how, the needs and the expectations of those who are entering or are gonna enter the workforce. It's fascinating, really, to understand how things are evolving and transforming. And I know that's something that's very dear to your heart, having been so close to change management and transformation. Amazing. Well, let's open up our conversation. Today, we're going to talk about culture, a topic that I know we are both very passionate about. So it promises to be full of insights and filled with wonderful exchange. I'd like to open up our conversation with a powerful question. What is workplace culture to you? How do you define that word?
It's an important question. And I think it's an interesting question. You can summarize it. There's a few things. Number one, I believe workplace culture is, if you think about it's a vibe in general, to use the term vibe.
Yeah.
And what that means is it includes specific rituals, specific routines. It includes common goals. It includes leveraging potential of every single person that is there working in the organization. And I also believe there is an essence of wanting to be there, and there's an essence in believing in something. So workplace culture is more than just one or two things. It's a combination of things that are coming together, and they create really an essence that's beyond just people, beyond what the output is. I call it a complex social entity. To leverage some of the thinking that I've read and some of the theories that I've read, I think it's a complex social entity. And generally speaking, they're there together for some sort of common good. And I do believe that fully.
I completely agree. It's a sense of if it's a combination of many different things. I actually wrote about this. I know you saw this.
Mhm,
And I love that you use the word vibe, because that's the name of our
mhm,
magazine, which we just launched the second edition for, but the first edition was around
mhm,
the theme of culture.
mhm.
And that's exactly what we did. Embodying your strength is curiosity. We asked a bunch of people what it is, and we got as many different answers back than the quantity of different people we asked the question to. Like identity, trust, belonging, caring, it's shared meaning, shared goals, connections, rituals. Like an organization is a mini
Mhm.
society, right? Defined by rules and rituals and a common aspiration, goal, and all of that. And it really is, to your point, super complex.
There's a couple of things there that you've shared that I find amazing. Number one, the fact that you ask people, I think that's the most important thing. You
It
need to
is.
ask your people, what is the culture, right? Let them share with you what it means. And I also think the way that business is evolving and how fast things are moving, particularly in the technology space,
Mm,
it's about interactions. And you've talked about that. It's about interactions of human beings. It's not transactional.
yeah.
And I think traditionally,
Mm,
work has been seen as being transactional. I
yeah.
need you to produce this many widgets, right? But it's more interactions now. And I think that's incredibly important.
Yeah, and that's unique to people, right? Things and
Mhm,
objects can't interact, people can. And when you
mhm.
share all of those things that we just named, those rituals, that trust, those connections, that's what truly, oh, I don't want to step on my next point, but that's what
Yeah.
really curates your culture. But actually, to that point, I'd love to hear you on it, because
Mhm.
I know it's something that's that you study and you care a lot about. Do you think that culture is created or curated?
Yeah, I love that question. I love
Mm,
that question for a variety of things. I would say it's even more organic than that. I think culture if you define the word culture from a biological perspective, it's around things that are growing in or on a controlled, defined medium. When you culture something in a lab, right?
that's
And
interesting.
which is very interesting. And I think there's a lot of connections there. So I think it's organic to begin with. I do think when you say is it created or curated, I think there's a combination of both. I think,
Mm,
I think the individual that's starting up a company or starting up a business has a mindset has a great idea. I think those that are further advanced in understanding how to make that idea come to fruition, they're going to care about the people and they're going to care about how do they want the people to come and support and believe in their ideas in
right.
order to, to make these wonderful ideas come into, to make them a reality.
Mm,
So there's a creation bit at the inception. I do
mhm.
think it's also potentially curated, but not in a bad way. I think
No,
there's just so
it
much
evolves.
information out there in general. I think it's important to curate information and to bring it in or curate or
Mhm,
bring in ideas. But it's a
mhm.
combination of all these things. I don't think it's one or another. I think there's something organic about it. I do think it gets created at one point. I do think it's created over time and it evolves.
There's a saying in French, we say, rien ne se perd, rien ne se crée, tout se transforme. It translates to nothing is created, nothing goes to waste, everything transforms, right?
Mhm. That's
It
right.
is. In our previous conversations, you talked a lot about the concept of building a resilient culture. I have to say, I'm a big fan of that concept, but
Mm.
I'd like to hear you on what specifically that means to you. What's a resilient culture, Nancy?
Yeah, I'm glad that I've created a little bit of excitement with that.
Oh yeah.
It's something that has, I've been thinking about for some time and I've been observing it, in various experiences and so on and so forth. A resilient culture is one where there is courageous authenticity.
Mhm.
There is strength in numbers, so to speak. People come together, they collaborate, they work on things. It's a natural way of doing things. There is no fear. There's a lot of respect amongst people,
Mm.
whether situations are good or situations are bad or situations are incredibly difficult. It's an ethos of everyone is rolling up their sleeves, and there is the art of the possible. And no matter what hurdles or challenges come, there's always a solution. What's the problem to solve? There's always a solution. Nothing is impossible. A
Mhm.
resilient culture, um, it's not just about everything is, roses, because, there are challenges that happen day to day, whether it's in life, whether it's in work, whether, every single day. So a resilient culture is one that is planful and mindful of these potential challenges, but is also embodying that spirit of courageous authenticity, that no fear, failing fast. You've heard these kind of buzzwords, but there is
Yes.
something around that, and there's a respect for everyone that contributes. There's greater good for everyone, for what everyone brings to the table. It doesn't really matter their role or their title, but they bring something to the table. And the more that we can leverage that in business and really bring out the potential, I think that brings out resiliency. You don't have cracks, you don't have holes, you don't have first points of failure, as they call it. And I'm sure I'm not expressing the term correctly, but where one person in the organization knows everything, and if that person goes, the whole organization is in trouble. And we shouldn't have situations like that anymore. Like, this is what we should be looking at across our teams and organizations. So a resilient culture is one. If I were to use those big words, it's strong, there's courage, there's no fear, there's
Mhm.
possibility, and there's respect. There's a lot of respect.
I'm hearing there's appreciation for everyone's value and recognition of that value, acceptance that people are different and that the world and our context is constantly evolving. And it's about embracing that change
Mhm.
and
Exactly.
appreciating the learnings that come from it, while always being completely respectful of what's going on around us and the people that we're living that change or trying to achieve this this destination with.
Yes.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. You brought in
And likewise.
my job is just to recap what you said. I feel like you're a wealth of knowledge here. I can
Oh,
add
I would
just
say more experience, maybe a little bit more experience, but I'm still learning a lot. I don't know everything. These are just connections I've been seeing over time. So,
and I think that's great. It's great that you're so humble about it and that you keep, being completely curious and admit the fact that you don't know it all and that you're still learning and you're still experimenting. And I think that's the beauty in it. And that's resilience, right? In a way.
it is true. Yeah.
If you had to narrow it down to like
Mhm.
one main element to recap everything that you said about, I guess when you have a resilient culture, you have all of those ingredients that you named.
Mhm.
If there's one element to remember, what would it be?
Yeah, I was struggling with one because for me it's always about connection. So I was thinking about it. So I would say two words.
Okay,
I have to say two words because otherwise to me one
it's too narrow.
well, it's like physics, right? There's an action, there's an action, there's a reaction, right? There's always a duality to certain
Always.
to things. So um to me, it's around inclusion. I think that's a huge word, inclusion, in every sense of the word inclusion. And when I say inclusion, it includes all aspects, diversity and
Mhm.
equity and accessibility. I call it
Belonging.
inclusion,
Mhm.
belonging. And I also believe there's progress, right? And so when I say resilient culture, there is progress, there is momentum, there is, we're moving forward, we're doing new things, there's innovation. I think to me, those are two elements that are yin and yang. There's inclusiveness and there's progress if you're going to simplify it. And you'll see that in resilient cultures.
Seems obvious, but do you think it's needed to go through hardships to build a resilient organizational culture?
So inevitably, organizations will go through hardships. It's inevitable. It's just being planful about it. We talked, like I mentioned, there's business continuity planning, disaster recovery planning. There's, you could argue succession planning for organizations as well.
Mhm.
But I think they're the hardships that we don't necessarily talk about or think about. I think we need to go like a couple of layers deeper. And it's not, again, to kind of overblow something. It's just knowing that it will happen, things will happen. How are we going to work through that? So how do you build on it? You know,
And it's
it's
such a
it's
big part. Go ahead.
I was just going to, it's like I mentioned earlier when we talked about, the pendulum, right?
Mhm, mhm.
It's not an afterthought, about your people, your team, or engagement. It's not the swing of the pendulum. It needs to be part of everything that you're doing on a day-to-day basis for organizational effectiveness. It
Yeah.
needs to have the same attention to strategy. It needs to have the same discipline. It needs to have, the same strategic thinking mindset, if not more so than anything else that you're doing. Because the amount of time organizations spend, for example, recruiting. If you were to, really break down the numbers when someone leaves an organization to when someone comes and the amount of time to ramp that person up, the amount of effort to find that person, there's a lot of money being spent on that, which kind of no one notices, so to speak. We're not
Mhm.
really measuring
What's
it in
business?
some, right?
Mhm.
We need to spend more time on retaining people and understanding and making it inclusive for them. And I think a resilient culture um, enables that. It really does enable that. It enables people to get a meaningfulness from work. It provides them with a sense of purpose. It's all the intrinsic motivation pieces, I believe, that are there.
Agreed. Again, putting myself in the shoes of someone listening to us talk and,
Mhm,
maybe being seduced about this idea of building a resilient culture. Obviously, they have
mhm.
one that's already existing. But what would you say, like, is the key thing to do if you want to start building that from this ground up, like from the start? If that's you're intentional about building that resilient culture within your organization, what's the first thing you need to think about or get right to set it up for success from the start?
I think you need to have a common goal, and I think that common goal is, what do we want to be known for as an organization?
Exactly.
Oh, I
Wow,
thought you
that's
were.
bang on. What do you want to be known for? Agreed.
Yeah.
And like there's this, I've said this many times. There's a saying that goes that culture is the thing that people do and the way they act when you're not looking.
Mhm.
Doesn't that speak volume? And this resonate, like what you just said resonates and makes me think of that is what do we want to be known for when people look at you, when they look at your organization, when they deal with you with their client and they're dealing with your organization, either buying a service or a product. What do you want to be known for? What do you want people to remember you for? Wow, words of wisdom. Thank you. So we've talked about the what, we've detailed what a resilient culture is. I'd love for now to dive into the how, to really give our listeners actionable advice on how to build a culture that can help teams thrive through all of this. When we developed this first edition of the magazine, that we received a great question, which I think segues perfectly with our last point. I'd love to hear your advice, what your answer would be to that person
Sure.
question. They ask, let's say we don't have a culture per se, or it's like undefined, even just like blah.
Mm.
How do you go about building it? How do you define your company values, and who does this? So I can repeat the three questions, but how do you
Mhm.
go about building that culture if you're that person asking that question?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And, I would say that they do have a culture if they're asking about how do you build a culture. So there is some baseline. If
Yep.
there's a bunch of people doing work together, there's some sort of culture.
Mm,
I think there are a few things there. I think setting values up, I think to me, values are an overt expression of culture, having some sort of core values, whatever they may be. And I'm not talking about, books and books or reams and reams of content. I'm talking about like 4 statements or 3 statements that
mm,
everyone will remember and everyone will embody and everyone will respect and get excited about.
mm,
And I know that in one organization I worked at, those values were quite simple. One was, you know, um, respect legacy, care more, do the right thing, you know,
mm,
simple phrases, and I think engaging or kind of doing a current state, and I hate to use the word current state assessment, it sounds so clinical. Ask your people a bunch of questions in a survey to say, hey,
Ah,
just ask them, what do you think? What do you, whatever those questions are,
How do you
How would you
define
define our
our culture?
culture?
Yeah. What do you
What
think
should
we're
some of our,
known for?
what are we known for? What kind of values, for how we do things around here, what inspires you the most, or what are you most passionate about? Some may say, oh, I love my customers, or I love the people I work with. You have all the information already. You have it all. Just understand, find out what resonates the most, reflect on it, and then, is this something that you can then do some internal branding for or external branding for? I think employer brand to me is one of the most important things to think about in general in the world today, employer brand. And employer brand to me is a reflection of what do you want to be known for? So how do you go about building it? I think you need to engage your people.
Mhm.
How do you go about defining your values? Ask them what they think.
Yeah.
Ask the leader. Like there is someone. So either someone has I say like the coveted position and responsibility to manage an organization from the top, whether they're appointed like a CEO or whether they're a founder. In either case, those two individuals or that, at the top of the organization, they need to embody and believe what their values are. And they need to be not the mouthpiece, but they need to be the ones that are promoting it the most, and then of course everyone else, and then the entire organization. Not to look at it at a hierarchical perspective, but if the leader at the top isn't embodying it, what you see in organizations today, in my personal opinion, is a direct mirror reflection of the leader at the top. Hands
Agreed.
down. That's
They
it.
need, yeah, their values need to be translated into how they behave, treat people, and make decisions about their business and about their people.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's what you're saying.
Mhm.
And I agree. Although you didn't want to use the word, I think an assessment of the current state is the right place to start,
Yeah.
because culture is there, whether you like it or not. When a group of people form together to be a team, an organization, it's there. It starts existing, to your point earlier, organically, right?
Mhm.
So the way you go about defining your culture and your values does need in part to reflect the current state. So what's the experience of the people that are working with you currently? And I obviously I love your idea of asking your people, because they know, they're the one living it. They're the one embodying those values. And if you
Mhm.
think, I don't know, tree is the name of a value, but it's not absolutely not the way people behave in the organization. It's banana, I'm using words of things around me.
Of course. Yes.
That I want to name
100%.
specific values, but yeah, that's the essence you need to do about it. But then you need to also make the effort to, I feel, have your culture or your values and those statements that you were talking about be also in part an aspiration towards what you want that culture to be, because it's not fixed in time, right? So it's a reflection of the current state, but also what you aspire to be known
Mhm.
for or continue to be known for in time. What do you think?
Exactly. Yeah, no, exactly. And values, and culture, resilient or otherwise, these are things that evolve over time. These is and there's nothing wrong with it. There's new leadership, or there's new employees coming in, there's new perspectives. um
It evolves.
it's organic, like we talked about, and whatever word you want to use, organic, biological, it's a living entity. It's not a two-dimensional thing. It's multi-dimensional, and I think embracing and understanding that and really holding a light to it within an organization and giving it the funding, the money, whatever it's required, because that's typically where, there's a lot of when companies go through hard times, it's usually
Mm.
overhead that gets cut back, and then these things can, I'm not saying you need a ton of cash around it, but you need to have some responsibility around it. Someone to be the gatekeeper, the leader of the light, whatever you want to call it, that is leading the charge for the organization, because there is strategy around it, there is work around it, there are changes that come from it, and it's all good.
I agree. And it makes me think of, the importance of continuously measuring or taking the
Mhm.
pulse on that culture. Like as we do with
Mhm.
employee engagement, culture is part of that too. So many of the things that we talked about are actually questions that we ask in our pulse surveys, in the product, which I know you use with your team.
Mhm.
And I feel it's often forgotten that it needs to be constantly measured in a way where you're taking the pulse of your people, you're getting feedback on that. And too many times I've seen organizations do this in a very cyclical manner. Like every couple of years, they'll go back and they'll say like, oh, it's time for us to refresh or update our values or change our values. Like that, to your point, there's supposed to be someone, although it's a shared responsibility, there's someone that's supposed to be the gatekeeper of that, continuously measuring, gauging employee sentiment on that, effectively monitoring how that culture is changing and evolving over time, so that we don't wait for, that review that we've planned in a couple of years when we do this strategic planning or reorg or whatever. And again, it all comes back to asking those questions frequently and understanding that experience. You were going to add?
Organizations, a lot of them that are particularly that provide products or customer facing or customer serving, are always doing customer assessments, customer surveys. They're always doing that. Look at Google reviews. It's constant. The same sort of diligence around gathering that feedback and how the experience is for customers, or in some cases subscribers, whatever your business model is, patients, etc. The same thing is for employees. The same amount of effort as far as gauging how's it going. Is it not working? What ideas do you have? Where are some gaps, or what are some things that are working? What's not working? That constant pulse. It's not an annual employee survey. It's not every 2 years. It's a constant pulse. I think that's the way that makes the most sense, which is why where I'm at currently, we love in our organization using Office Vibe. I think it's an incredible tool. I think it has opened up a lot of our eyes. It's helped us engage our employees in a different way. It's helped us understand, particularly in a hybrid work environment, it helps us understand how everyone is feeling at any given point in time and what's important to them. It's not like I can pop by someone's desk. We don't have that same dynamic anymore. So that tool is incredible. I do have some more thoughts around building a resilient organizational culture, but I'll let you go to your next questions before I start pontificating again.
No means. I mean, we've drafted those questions just to guide our conversation. I would love for the conversation just to flow organically. That's my goal here. Please just carry on. It's all good.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about. We're talking about the how.
The how. So for the how, like from building a resilient culture. So again, through my readings, my experiences over time, my observations, listening, being involved in, I've developed a notional framework that I eventually want to test out, which will continue on with my research. And I think there are 3 levels to this framework. And a lot of this that you may have heard, but what I believe, and it becomes a 9-box grid. Yes, I have my MBA. Yes, it's a 9-box. But it's whatever. I'm just being like making fun of myself. But the 3 levels are, what I call corporate change leadership, organizational effectiveness, and strategic business planning. And each level has 3 components that I'd like to research and study independently. So when I say corporate change leadership, this is the individual or individuals who either are accountable for the whole organization or they're accountable for a team of people, okay? And I think they need to practice and demonstrate 3 things. Self-care, I think, is incredibly important. Presence, and what I mean by presence is incredibly important. This is about when you're in the moment with the person, when you're in the meeting addressing people, you are focused just on them and nothing else, incredibly important. And in what I call symbolic action. So these are like new rituals. These are new things that a leader does to show this is our way forward. Whatever that symbolic action is. Whether it's some leaders you see in organizations, they go and they work in the front line for a day. That to me is a symbolic action. They work with the customers. They get to understand what the employee's going through, what the customer is doing. There's all sorts of examples.
Roll up their sleeves. They do it.
Roll up their sleeves and get in there and actually do it, and not just get a report about it at the top. I think that's important. I know, and I'll go to the second one, but I can see you have a question or comment.
I know. It's resonating. Carry on.
The second one is more around the whole, I would say team purview, team dynamic, and I call that organizational effectiveness. Again, it's a term out there, and I'm sure there's different definitions of it, but in that team layer, which is about groups of people, there are three components that you have to, I think it's important to look at to either do and or do extremely well. One is around engagement. So everything to do with employee engagement, I think, is something that needs to be considered as something that this organization is doing extremely well. They're engaging employees. Communication is two-way. It's open. That's the second thing. Communication, two-way, open, honest, authentic, no
Mhm.
barriers.
Mhm.
Third is actually I used to have a culture in my nine box, but I've changed the term culture because to me this is all about resilient culture. I changed that to DEIA, or diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility. I think that's incredibly powerful and important. That needs to be looked at and regarded day to day. The third layer, the bottom one, is what I call strategic business planning. And I know that sounds so clinical, but and I tell you, it's incredibly important insofar as the three components there for an organization. And this is about the organization as an entity: focus, decision making, and then execution. Focus meaning, do we know what our goal is? Do you know what our North Star is? Do you know what we're looking to actually
Or
drive?
direction. Mhm.
Our direction. Decision making, is it crystal clear? Is it accountable? Does it make sense? Are we flip-flopping? Now sometimes you have to change decisions, which makes
Yes.
sense because of what happens in business today.
Yeah.
But with focus and right decision making, then it's about execution. So if you have all of these 9 elements in an organization, my theory is that it's a resilient organization. People are thriving. They're not just surviving, they're thriving. Organization is progressing. People are happy to be there. They want to be there. Everyone knows what they stand for, what they're all about, and they're all collectively working together. And in that environment, every single person's potential and what they have to offer is respected,
Mhm.
it's utilized, and it is making, it creates success for the business, for the people, the
And the
company,
business.
and then stakeholders as well.
It's a win-win. And all of the things that you just said there are the ingredients
Mhm.
and the factors that you need to drive employee engagement. That's exactly it. And when
Mhm.
you do, and you take care of those things, and you make sure you check the box on all those elements, and you intentionally
Mhm.
have those 9 elements present, what you have is people that are using their strengths and their best capacity in their role, contributing to a shared mission, and they become proud ambassadors.
Exactly.
Has a huge impact on your business, on your capability to retain and recruit new talent, which is what the business is about. No people, no business.
No people, no business. Exactly. Exactly right. So that was I just wanted,
Beautiful.
so thank you for letting me share that. And now I'm going to turn it over to you.
No, I mean, this is just so great. I think we should build an asset, if you want, maybe in collaboration, where we share that
Sure. Yes.
hypothesis, where your model has all of those elements together. And I'd love to actually develop a framework where we're able to assess if those elements are present, and to what degree they're present, and where are the gaps, and then what are the actions to reduce those gaps, so that we work towards that resilient culture, if you want. Love
Yeah,
to.
absolutely. I'm all for that. I love collaborating. I know that I love the way that you think and the way that your team thinks. I've been working with you guys I shouldn't say you guys. I've been working with the Office 5 team. I hate when people say you guys. It just sounds
Me
wrong.
too, but it's
I'm
so
work.
hard to take out of our
I
language.
know. I've been working with the Office 5 team since we started using Office 5 in the organization. I've, supported some of the research that the product managers are doing
Yeah.
and whatnot. And I just think that the dynamic is fantastic, and I'm inspired with what you do, and I'd be happy to collaborate. So,
Thank you, and likewise.
mm,
Um, I know you don't have an official HR role, but you have quite a lot of
I have, yeah, in the
expertise,
past. Yeah.
experience in the
Mhm.
past. I'd really be curious to get your advice on what HR leaders can do to help employees and managers help their team in turn through tough times to build resilience. What can they do to help?
Yeah, I think checking in often is the most important thing. Listening and checking in. And when I say listening, like really listening. And listening goes beyond just what is said. It's body language, it's demeanor, it's,
What the
you're
feedback is
also,
not telling you.
exactly. And I think that's incredibly important.
Yeah.
I think it's about individual attention. I know that sometimes in organizations, there's not enough, managers to go around to every single employer. There's not enough HR folks to go around to support every single employee. And
Sure.
sometimes things are broad brushed.
Yeah.
But I think individual attention is important. And I'm not saying it from a mollycoddling or whatever the language is perspective, because
Yeah.
there are resources available. Communication, is typically amazing from HR teams to organizations, but it's getting deeper and getting a little bit more like either focus groups or some sort of individual attention to people. I think is
Yep.
incredibly important.
Yeah.
And many who do it well do that extremely well.
Mhm.
It's also about keeping the message about moving forward and celebrating each other in small wins along the way, but also giving space to those that need space for whatever that is. So there's a variety of concepts there. And again, it's not complicated, because it's not like if you do these things, this will happen. It's complex
Mhm.
again. It's a complex situation. So it's listening, learning, being curious, adapting, and helping manage versus solving something. Sometimes you can't solve things. Sometimes you just need to manage and lead through it.
Wow, that's a beautiful lesson, I feel, for HR leaders out there. I take it, and for managers also out there. A lot of them have this default reflex to say it's my job to solve problems. What if it isn't? What if you're a
Mhm.
facilitator of understanding that problem and figuring it out together, leveraging your people's strengths and ideas and mindset and complexity as human beings, right?
As human beings. Yeah,
Mhm.
I'm with you 100%. And the key there is, and I think we have to be mindful of this in HR. We have there are HR policies or practices across organizations, of course.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not cookie cutter. Sometimes, it's really then kind of getting back into that whole DEIA, diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility.
Mhm.
We're in a world where technology is personalized. So our support of people in some ways, and I know there are going to be people that are going to say, oh my God, don't say that out loud. It should be personalized, I think.
Yeah.
Individual employee experience should be personalized. It's not a cookie cutter mass approach.
Mhm. Some things are
I'm
common,
saying
some
it,
things are
I'm
individual. Yeah.
sure I'll get criticized for it, but that's okay. It could be about mindset, but it's about, there's a difference between what is the equality and equity. If
Yes.
equity is there, that's great. Quality, it's all incredibly important, but we do, I think, need to be mindful of individual personal circumstances in general, where we need to be, and that's okay, and that's totally okay.
Absolutely. I agree with you. I understand that some people might not, but I agree. Every individual is unique. There's a saying that
Mhm.
that comes back to my head. I think it was Margaret Mead that said that. She said, remember you're unique, just like everyone else.
This is it, 100%.
Yeah. So there
So,
are elements that are common, but there are elements that are unique. And to what we were saying, this is a living thing, right? What is a circumstance that
mhm,
is very negative for me today could be a circumstance that is very positive for you tomorrow. We deal with things differently. We have a different capability of dealing through change and emotions and all of that. And we have to be there's a standard, I guess, to be set, but there's also room for space and allowing people to deal with things in their own different ways and go through their experience in a different way. To your point, it's not cookie cutter. It's not a recipe that can be followed and work perfectly instantly for everyone.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Lovely. How about we end our great
Sure.
conversation on, the impacts of a resilient culture. We've talked about what it is
Mhm.
and how to build it. Let's talk about why it's really super important to build it and what are the outcomes that can come from having a resilient culture. So I guess that's my question to you. What are the impacts, sorry, of a resilient company culture on an organization?
I think the impacts and the benefits are always going to be long term. So this is around sustainability and longevity. This is
Yeah.
around creating legacy, in my personal opinion. If you get that routine momentum and support and understanding correct, um, you will have a sustainable organization for the long term. So from, think about some of the biggest brands that are in existence today and how long they've been around. There's something in those brands that it has to do with resiliency as
Yeah.
far as culture and their teams. I believe. Not to say that some of the newer brands don't have that. I'm sure they have it as well, but there's something there. There is a positive reflection of employer brand, which attracts talent, which, people want to work for your organization, which I think is huge. I also think the organization from a bottom line perspective will have improved overarching productivity,
Mhm,
improved innovation. They're always doing more, they're tweaking more.
mhm.
I find it fascinating how many, for example, um, food manufacturers, manufacturers of food products. If you notice in the last, I would say my personal opinion, last 10 years more than ever, there's a lot more product variation, right? It's constantly changing and evolving.
Same.
And these are for some of these bigger brands. They don't just stick with, here's the product and that's it. There is constant innovation and evolution and so on. I think a resilient company culture supports that because if they're doing that, their teams are wired to do that.
They
There
are.
is that, right? There's an instant synergy there. I also believe, and I think this one is really important, especially for HR teams. The impact of a resilient organizational culture is that there is sustained organic employee growth. So what I mean by that is we hire for certain roles for certain teams to get certain jobs done. But organizations, the orgs change design all the time. Roles change all the time.
Mm,
I think we need to be a little bit more comfortable in exploring employee growth into new roles that aren't in your existing, org structure today, but we need these roles. So why not just, hey, Sally would be great for that, or Bob would be great for this. Why
mhm,
not just have that mindset to,
mhm.
evolve employees and
Experiments.
grow into.
And say there might be something there in what Sally's been saying for a couple of months. She wants to do
Right.
that. She thinks there's an opportunity to leverage her strengths. Why not say yes? Why not be open to the experiment while not sacrificing the other responsibilities Sally has, but just being open to that experiment and say, let's see where that takes us and how that shapes our organization.
So the last point there, exactly to that, is that technology is going to change internal processing across companies across the world. We know that.
Yep.
Artificial intelligence, robotics, everything is changing.
Mhm.
Processes are becoming more automatic. That doesn't mean that necessarily we're going to have less people. It just means their jobs will change and adapt. So
Different.
if we have that kind of perspective, I think organizations will navigate through that, and it will be a positive for the organization. It leads to their longevity and their sustainability if they're able to do it effectively.
That's a beautiful way to tie that. It leads to their sustainability is a word that we don't talk about enough, I feel, in businesses nowadays. So thank you for bringing that to the table.
Mm.
I love to, I have a soft spot for stories. Do you have any stories to share where the resilience aspect of the culture made a huge difference in overcoming a particular situation? Does anything come to mind?
Yeah, no, I was reflecting on that. There's so many different stories over the years, and I always try to keep it current and relevant. And I would have to say, and I would say this story is probably true in many organizations. You've probably heard it 100 times, just how our company or how companies have evolved through navigating through COVID.
Yeah.
First global pandemic of my lifetime. And for many organizations, I think it's going to be the new classic example
Yeah.
of resilient, cultures or organizations that work through it and thrived. I think the recipe to success there was really focusing on employee well-being,
Mm,
right? Particularly mental health, but
mm,
also keep the lights on, keep moving forward. So I would say that there's a lot of adaptability, a lot of strength and trust in leadership, a lot of respect for people,
mhm,
and adjusting through uncharted waters. Again, I'm using a cliche,
mhm.
but COVID has, in my mind, has brought to the forefront resilient cultures. I think there's many examples of many stories across organizations. And so when I say a particular story, I mean, our company was phenomenal. I mean, we reverted to remote working like overnight, like many other organizations.
Mhm.
You know, making sure employees had everything that they needed in their home office to make it work, making sure, and you know, our teams had time off when they needed to have time off, respecting, you know, and being mindful of difficult illness situations throughout that time, because it was the first year was very difficult and challenging, but
Okay.
also at the same time celebrating our successes and keeping moving with the agenda. We had our town halls. Instead of being in the office with food, our
Mhm.
CEO sent everyone a snack box for the town hall at home. So we still had our town halls as an example, right?
Yeah.
Which is amazing. So you know, it's a
Yes.
little bit different, but you make it work.
You adapted your rituals as a
Adapted.
company. Yeah.
We adapted the rituals. And I think that was really important. And we focused more on mental health and more on giving people space, more on people giving time to adjust to that new normal. And I
Mhm.
would say like we've had the last couple of years have been our most successful. And it's because we focused on the people first while maintaining, you know, the lights on and being mindful for our subscribers. That's
Yeah.
always priority number one. But we were able, you know, by focusing on our people, we were able to take care of our subscribers during unprecedented time in history, in my history anyway. So,
'Cause you
which
took
is
care.
inspiring. Like, who wouldn't want to work for an organization that has that kind of,
Mm.
I don't know what you want to call it, resiliency.
Yes, there you go. I agree. I mean, COVID was a huge test. I studied the impacts of that. I spoke with a bunch of team leaders and managers, and I did a full literature review. And one of the things that stood out was really, that's one of the first times I heard about the concept of a resilient culture.
Okay.
And to your point, the companies and organizations and people that were able to make it through that were those that fostered trust
Mhm.
within their people, with it across the organization, trusting employees to make the right decision, to be respectful and grateful for the flexibility. Also knowing that they had a job to do, also knowing that it was okay to raise your hand when something was wrong and you needed support. Leaders embracing, you know, a big start for many leaders, it was really uncomfortable to start talking about mental health and, you know, become worried about
Mhm.
their employees feeling isolated or feeling stressed or lacking context or, you know, for whatever reason. I think we all went through that situation in very different ways and dealt with similar and different concerns. But there was if trust was still there, if rituals were maintained and adapt to fit in a remote context, if we kept trust high and we kept an eye, to your point, on keeping the lights on, we kept our focus, we continued communicating very strongly, consistently, continuously with their people, it worked because you have that trust capital that I like to talk about. You kept it there, and it gets people through storms, and it prepares you for the storms that are ahead. And to what you were saying earlier, it's not about, you know, confronting change, it's accepting that change and turmoil and hardships will be there along the way, and
Mhm.
it's embracing them as part of the journey. You know, it becomes a mindset question.
It becomes a mindset question. It
Yeah,
becomes a human question,
it does.
right?
Uh, I feel so inspired by our discussion, by our conversation. How wonderful was that? Thank you so much for all of the insights that you brought, for sharing your research, for being so generous with, you know, sharing your passion with me and with our audience. So I have to ask before we end our wonderful conversation, if you're up for a quick vibe check, how are you doing really?
That honestly, even more inspired. I think, you know, speaking with you, JJ, it's inspiring to speak with someone that's of the same mindset and,
Mhm.
you know, and is curious and wants to explore. That
I hope.
gives me energy. It's the same like when I'm a TA for the risk class and listening to their questions and seeing their energy. it's to me, you've filled up my cup today. So I appreciate that. Very grateful.
Thank you for filling up my cup. I needed that today. It's a great day outside.
It's a
And
great day. Yeah.
it is really great, but it fills me up with energy and passion and a renewed kind of like a daily renewed commitment to continue researching all of this because it's a big part of my role. And this is the reason why I do it. It's to talk about it with people like you who share the same mindset, but who challenge that with new and bright insights and concerns about how this is evolving, but also to share it with people around the world. So thank you for bringing your contribution to that shared mission, I guess.
Oh, a true pleasure. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And really enjoy everything about you. And we really love Office Vibe. It's one of the best engagement tools out there. If you haven't had it, guys, whoever's watching, go get it.
Promise, we didn't ask you to say this.
No, you didn't ask me, but it'll change your world. It'll change your world. You know, to the company that said, "Oh, it's blah," well, get Office Vibe and start from there, and you'll be amazed what happens.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being you, Nancy, for being such a great client to us and such a great partner. Until next time, bye-bye.
Bye.